Hey there, Seth. Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Whoop, whoop,
Matter
whoop.
podcast. We are super excited to chat with you today. And you're coming from, a place that we love to visit,
We
Katy, Texas.
practically
So
call home
almost, I
nowadays,
think it's one of the places, when we travel, we've probably traveled there the most lately. So thanks for joining us. How are things going? Let us know, where your teaching role is right now.
Things are going well. I'm a eighth grade math teacher, and next year I'm going to be the department chair for my campus for the math department. Uh, and that's going to be a different role this year because they've trimmed down two instructional coaches. So there's no instructional coach over math. There's two instructional coaches over math, but there's no instructional coach with math as their like forte.
Right.
So it'll be the instructional coaches are more there for the instruction, and I'll be there more as the um lead over the to help them with the math content. So
Oh,
that'll be a
okay.
role. I'll be teaching, but also helping the teachers with the math content.
Got it. Got it. Very, very interesting. And, John and I both know that, yeah, there have been some changes in your school district. I know, we've done a lot of work with the wonderful friends there at Katy. And so there's been a little bit of a reorg there. So I'm sure there's
Yes.
a lot of people that are feeling the way you're feeling right now, which is probably like excited, but maybe I'm gonna guess, maybe like, like, what does that look like and sound
Right.
like? Because it's a new structure. And I'm gonna extend that beyond Katy and say there's probably a lot of other people out there who are dealing with similar things, right? Every year, new changes, new roles. But before we dig into those weeds, we don't want to forget this question. It is the question we ask every guest on the podcast, and that is when you hear about math class or math in general, what is that math moment for you that sort of pops into your mind?
So for me, my math was pretty the same as almost everyone, but I enjoyed math so much. So I love they teach it, I do it, and I was a great math person. But I had one math teacher who was different. He didn't teach us at the board. He made us read the book ourselves, figure it out ourselves.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
and if we would come to him with a question, his first question to us is, have you read it? Have you read the chapter yet? So he wouldn't give it to us, he would make us
Interesting.
even though it was a different way because he was having us read the book,
Right.
which is kind of laid out for you. So it's still kind of taught the same way, but you're still having to go get it yourself.
Right.
It was my geometry teacher. I only remember him standing up at the room maybe 4 or 5 times to teach us, and that was because he was teaching us how to construct proofs. But other than that,
Right.
it was the whole do it yourself. And I started the year and I struggled at the beginning, and struggled for me, I was probably low 90s. And then by the end of the year, I was getting high 90s, like 90, 98, 99. So I came to really like the way he taught just because it forced me to have to
Mm.
do more of the digging myself.
I was
So
gonna.
Can I guess here for a second and say that I'm guessing like a lot of kids probably like weren't big fans of it,
I'm
at the
guessing,
time.
yeah.
Like I know there was actually now you just reminded me there was an individual teacher early in my career who kind of did the same thing. And I remember, and this was before my own math epiphany, where I thought I was still doing this like I was working way harder than the kids, like I was like doing everything, trying to like,
Mm.
make sure everybody got it. And it was like I was working overtime. And this teacher was doing something very similar. And I remember at the time thinking, like, man, like he should like get up and do something, and me, like that's the way I thought about it. But the more you think about it, and and who knows whether he could have did it better or not or whatever. But like at the end of the day, when you like look at what can be gained from some of those experiences, right? Even if one of the biggest, pieces is the fact that I'm guessing you probably learn more about how you have a
Right.
pretty big brain in there and that you could do a lot of things on your own if you really set your mind to it. Like I've got to assume like some of the kids that did the work probably came out with at least that skill of being able to see that like, I can do this. Like I don't have to like sit here and wait for somebody to, spoon feed me all this information.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I think that I connect to that experience because it helps me connect to the experience that I've learned the last couple of years since you've come down to Katy and been working with us. And I've been doing that more, and I just see it how much the kids they are they are attacking. They're willing to. I'll tell them, okay, I'm not going to show you anything. I'm giving you the problems. Go try it, and they go try it, and they do it on their own. I know that I know they can do it, and it's just that they have to believe it. And once they believe it,
Mm,
they just go, and it's
right.
crazy. And I love that
There's
aspect
a
of this way I teach.
it's almost like there's a fine line, right? Because when you described your teacher, I imagined this teacher just sitting at the desk. You come up and
Feet up? Like,
you're
are you
like,
thinking feet up,
no,
John?
feet
Like on
up.
the
No, no,
desk?
feet up. They had to put their book down like they were reading a novel or something like that. And then it's like, yeah, go back and read it again. Like you just read it wrong. Like do it again. Like, you know what I mean? It's like there's a fine line to the way I imagined what you described there, and I think what you're doing in your classroom. Like I think you're talking about like being less helpful is really important if we're going to ask students to struggle and productively struggle through that that process. But tell us, like you said, like you're thinking about it now, but give me a more of a snapshot of like what does it mean, like when you that stuck with you, and how does that translate into what you're trying to do in your classroom?
I don't know. I think probably I was never taught that way before, so I've always thought that it was kind of all my other teachers would always teach us how to do it and step by step and things like that. And he was the first teacher that didn't do it that way. And I think I've come to appreciate it more because it forced us to build that problem. It forced us to build a work ethic in ourselves that we didn't know that we maybe had. Cause like he was
Mm,
forcing us to figure it out. Um, and so I like that. He was also my computer science teacher because I came from a small town. So like he was my computer science and my
Sure.
math teacher. So it's kind of interesting. But I found it to be a great way, and I think it probably helped you for college too, because you had to do a lot of that in college,
right.
Hmm.
in terms of figuring it out yourself sometimes.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And John, yeah, definitely, I had that vision in my mind when, I was curious, like where Seth was going to go. Like, was that like going to be a good experience or a bad one? And I appreciate the fact that, you know what, there's so many different maybe styles out there. And it's like, if you can find the best parts of every style and like find a way to like use it in an intentional way, you could do some pretty powerful things, and it sounds like that's sort of what you're trying to get out of your students here, Seth. So, before we go much deeper, let's dig right in here, my friend. It's the end of the school year for you as we record this. I'm guessing, thinking ahead. We don't know exactly what you want to chat about here, but we are curious. What's on your mind lately? What sort of pebble is kicking around in that shoe? Is it the new role? Is it something going on in your own classroom? Maybe it's a little bit of both. Tell us a little bit more about what you're working through right now.
So when I signed up in May, and I was really my pebble was because I've been wanting to do standards-based grading more. I have kind of transitioned. Half of my grades this year were standards-based and half were kind of assessment-based, which was not assessment-based, assignment/assessment-based. Um, and because I've been working through the standards-based grading, I wanted to go all in on standards-based grading this year. And I've been going through your assessment through for growth
I love it. Our course.
uh
Yep.
course. And I really came to like the whole idea of portfolios. They've always said use portfolios, but I've never in my head could wrap my mind around how to use a portfolio in a math classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And your assessment for growth class kind of gave me an idea. Now I do have a few questions. That's my pebble is I don't know how I want to
Mm,
attack the portfolio.
all right.
Uh, and also my other pebble is I wanted to ask you about your how you so you guys assess weekly, but you have a 75-minute course. You have a 75-minute class.
We
Our
do.
classes are 45 minutes, but we have them for the whole year.
Yep.
And so
Okay.
I just wanted to pick your brain on how you think, because my thought process, I've kind of worked through that, is maybe do an assessment every other week. And then
Hmm.
the week that I'm not assessing is the day that I do the return, and then they work on their portfolios for growth. That's
Ooh,
what
I
I'm
like that a lot.
thinking on that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Hmm.
I right out of the bag, and maybe John, you might see something a little bit different here, but the positive I really like about that is that it gives you it gives you that opportunity to get that meaningful feedback back to them. Whereas in our model, where we were doing it kind of all at once, we were doing the assessment, and then students, as they were done, they would kind of move on to an area that they needed to work on. So it provided them an opportunity, much like your math moment teacher did, where it was like, okay, now you need to go and review like what to work on. So there was something nice about that, but we didn't have as much time to say review what happened, say, the previous week, unless we were talking specifically to a specific student. So I like that gap. The one challenge, or I guess the one thing that I feel like I would lose if I could pick between the two, which you can't, you're stuck with whatever structure you have. But one thing that, and John, I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, the part that I used to like about it was that there was always some students that took a little longer on that assessment, right? So at
Mhm.
the beginning of class, we'd have it and we'd try to only pick a handful of problems that were relevant, some that went back and
Mhm.
reviewed some old
Mhm.
content, some that was more fresh and new. And it really allowed us to kind of get a sense of where things were. But it also didn't limit a student, like cut them off, and that would be the one part that I would miss if I had to split it up across, say, two 45-minute blocks instead of 1 75-minute, where you have that one student that likes to take, an extra 50% of the time, so they have less growth time to utilize, but they had more time to kind of think and work through the problems at their own pace and not feel so rushed. John,
Mm.
what are you thinking when you hear that structure and maybe some of the pros and cons?
Yeah. Yeah, I like the structure, and I think I like it differently than you like it, Kyle. I like the fact that it's spaced out, and in 45 minutes I would feel like also the way that we structured those, mini quizzes or mini assessments, those growth assessments that we were doing, and you would do it every other week. Um, was that they weren't these lengthy things that, these unit assessments, right? We were checkpoints, they're check-ins, they're almost like exit ticket kind of problems, where like you're giving them a couple problems that, like you said, Kyle, span what we did that week with a touchback to the week before. And you got a sense of like the flow of students working on those, seeing where they are, and then part of the growth, like the next week for you being like the next week is going to be the growth period where they're working on going back and going, where am I on my learning goals right now, and doing work on those learning goals. Like that's the part where I think we learn where our students are needing the most support and where they are. I think there's, like providing them that longer period that you're concerned about, Kyle, for 75 minutes to work on this kind of short assessment. I didn't feel like too many were taking that entire time anyway. So it was like mostly we were done in because we were doing half the period on that, half the period on the growth. But I mean, like, I don't think there was a ton taking longer than say 45 minutes to do that quick little snapshot, because it's
Mhm.
really, that's what you want it to be, right? You want it to be a snapshot of where they are, so that they're like, this is where I am on my journey on this
Mhm.
particular learning goal. And then the real power is in the growth, in the growth day, where they're like, okay, this is where I was. Let me prove that I can do it better. Like,
Mhm.
let me prove that I can grow on that strand or that learning goal. And I'll take time. I'll take that 45 minutes. Like, I like that it's actually 2 45 minutes, because that's more than, the time that we had in a sense, right? Because now you got a whole 45 minutes to do the growth. Like, I don't know about you, Kyle, but I found that when I split the 2 days, that if I designated 30-ish minutes for the quiz or the check-in, we would just get into the growth and then we'd have to switch. And it was
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
wished I wanted more time for the growth, which means in Seth's case, if he's going to flip flop every other week, you've got a good chunk of time to get into the growth part. And that's
Yeah.
really where the, where the change actually happens, because they get back their quiz, they get back where they are. And now it's like, let's make that better. And let's spend 45 minutes, working
Yeah.
on past
Yeah.
goals.
I definitely would not try to do two in one 45-minute period. Like I agree with you there, John. And it actually, I think I think hearing what you just said helped me to solve my own pebble if I was in Seth's shoes, where, if a student did maybe run out of time in that 45-minute block, like let's say they were, they just wanted a little more time, keeping in mind the whole purpose of that assessment is not about the quantity. It's about them getting as far as they can. And then the next week, that individual student, we'd probably go, hey, listen, try that one problem or a problem like it before moving on to, whatever else I had in mind, right? Just being a little more individualized. So,
Totally.
based on what you're hearing there, when you think about your structure, how is that like maybe landing with you? Is there any nuances there that you may be concerned about, or how do you feel about in terms of the basic structure anyway, in terms of what that might look like and sound like for you?
I think the basic structure, like when I was going through your course and because that was one big question, because I didn't know how many minutes you had. And then in the course, you said you get 75 minutes. So I was like, okay, they're doing everything in one day. And you kind of broke it down. Like I could split this into two.
Yeah.
And I've been doing, so this year I've used your assessment format, not for our main assessments, because our main assessments they're longer, and I'm trying to switch that a little bit this year and do shorter assessments. The problem is our assessments all have to be the same along all the teachers.
Right.
So that's a harder challenge in my class where our assessments have to be a common, and there's at least one other teacher and sometimes another teacher that does assessments. So if they're not on board with all that,
Oh, I thought I heard him say he was going to be the department head.
I am, which I'm gonna
new role, new
Yes.
opportunity.
Yes, you're right. That's why I'm gonna try and see if they're on board. I've already talked to one and she seems on board for the more frequent but shorter assessments. So but I did dabble with your testing this year as like my formative assessments in between
Yep.
before the big assessments.
Sure.
And I also had growth days, but the growth days I didn't like them because I gave them, the kids loved them actually. The kids loved the growth days because we were able to pull small groups. I was able to work with them, but I didn't like after they were done with correcting their quiz, what they were doing after. Because what they were doing after was I just had another assignment for them, which was not really like, I didn't really feel like that was benefiting the kids.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe not as intentional as you
So
would have maybe
Yes.
liked if you could.
Well,
And
what
that's
was
where
Yeah.
the portfolio is coming in. That's why now that you've got the
Okay. Got it.
portfolio, I want to do like you do, which is once they correct their quiz, now they go work on something that they need to work on. So it's
Exactly.
now theirs.
Now,
So
something that
go
I
ahead,
want
Kyle.
to, sorry, John.
No, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, Seth, like something that we found really helpful, but this will take time to build. And also if you can do it in numbers. So with your group, like the first thought I had, you going through the assessment for growth course, maybe you going and spending a little bit of time over the next, I don't know, today. No, I'm just kidding. But whenever you take this time, going through and trying to handpick maybe little parts of the course. And because you're at Katie and Katie is a district partner with us, everyone in your school district has access to that course, which also means that your department does as well. And my thought is not necessarily like, here's the hard thing as you wear this leader hat, like you're going to put this new title on or this new hat on. And I can already tell that you're probably already sort of like a somewhat of a leader in the building, whether there was a name or not attached to it. The reality is that you might not have everybody on your team willing to do an entire course, let's say over the summer, but you might be able to get them to take a peek at like one of the short lessons, right? So like maybe there's like a lesson there. Maybe it's the lesson that sort of puts you over the tipping point that kind of made it, like made you kind of lean in a little bit. Like you already knew about standards-based grading and you probably went into this course sort of, expecting to get what you're getting, which is great. But for somebody else that may not be in the same place, it's like, what can I pluck out of there and maybe send as just like, and here's the hard part is like, you'll never know if they actually do it or not. And that's okay. But like, you can send this off and be like, hey, this is an 8-minute, lesson, or it's a 12-minute lesson or whatever it is. The part I'm really think you'd like is around the 5-minute mark. Give it a shot. Let me know what you think or whatever. Get that conversation started. And as that summer goes on and as you start, breadcrumbing it is what we call it, is like you breadcrumb them along a little bit to hopefully get a little bit of people more interested in this idea. One of the best and most important parts over time is if you can all work together to kind of have what we call like little standards buckets, if that makes sense. So, like John and I would have, hey, we were going to work on these let's say 4 standards to start the year. We were going to kind of work on those and then we slowly add more standards to it. As that happens, if I could provide some different problems that are connected to these standards, and we used to put them at, whether you want to call it like depth of knowledge, or whether you wanted to call them like, more thinking type problems versus more entry level, like however you want, spicy and hot, sometimes people call it, and warm. You have these options there for kids so that at the end that they know, it's like, if I am working on this standard, the one thing that is much harder to do is to get kids to go find an applicable problem to work on related to that specific issue, rather than being able to say, go to that bucket, that folder. Ours was digital at the time. We used to have like a digital.
I've done it with folders though, Kyle. Like in the old days, when my very first, first few years of teaching, it was just folders on the wall, and there was pages in there that had like next steps for spicy or medium.
Yeah,
I didn't call it back then.
So there's a little bit of work to be done there, but it can be one of those things. Like if you use this next school year and you use the entire year as building this system so that hopefully next year, the system's kind of coming together. Like don't spend every waking moment on summer vacation putting all of this together. But imagine if like, like certain buckets have things in them and you just slowly add as you go, and imagine if you got a couple people in your department kind of helping. Like John and I worked together and we were in different districts because we were both teaching the same thing with the same mindset at the same time.
Well, also we built it through the year too. It's like I know that we didn't say build all the standards at the beginning of the year, even though you knew which ones you needed to touch on because it's part of the course, but you knew which ones were coming up in the next unit, and you would, we would prepare and go like, what is it? Okay, so if I'm going to assess on this standard, what is like beginning, middle, end of like that journey look like? How do I know like what problem or what look for is am I looking for on a student's work if they're at the top end, the middle end, the starting end, so that you have these things ready to go. But you would prep those as you went throughout the year. So it's a meaningful or a manageable amount of prep time. It wasn't like, oh, I need to prep all of these standards. It was, hey, what's the unit coming up, or what's the strand that we're working on? Let me prep that as we go, or let me prep it before we start so that it's there ready to go. Then it becomes a manageable amount. Because like when you think about the portfolios, like the way that we evolve those portfolios as well is that once say we wanted to have that portfolio available throughout working in that unit, so it was always like we were working ahead by one unit in a way to go, okay, let's have that portfolio ready to go when we start the unit, so that those tasks are set up for kids to sink their teeth into once we've like unlocked whatever standard we were working on that week, if that makes sense.
And it actually goes to my next question, because I've been working on trying to build, I have, I built some like bank of questions for the first learning goal that I've created. And that's one of the ones that we hit in the first cluster of topics. But I only have, so I have it tiered. I have 3, I don't know. That's where I have right now level 2, 3, 4, 5, which I could change to the word. So I'm not talking about the level 2, 3, 4, 5, because that was in your gamifying grading. You had mentioned like when they saw 3 stars, some kids would just stop. So you just did colors, which I thought was really cool. So I didn't know how to word them, which I could word them, like you said, medium, mild, and spicy. But right now I have one question for each level. The question I was going to ask you is how many and that was one of my questions. Do you have a bank of extras? Like how many at each level did you guys have?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I'll tell you, the first time around, not many,
Right.
and it really does. I think,
Yeah.
and the reason I say that, because what we ended up with, because we did teach in one case in particular, one course that, you know, we tended to teach a lot, and we really enjoyed teaching this course, so we would request it. And you know, you end up getting a bunch, you know, like over time you're like, oh, this one would be like, you know what I mean? You'll see a question and you go, that's perfect for, you know, a really challenging
Right.
problem for this one. Cause there would be some standards here, we call them expectations. You go, you know, like I don't really have anything like, you know, kind of thought provoking or like something to push students maybe further. Like you know, in certain buckets, you're going to feel that way, and it's not going to be perfect at first. But the more you know, it's what I found extremely helpful for us, which was one of the only times I think that I felt standardized testing was helpful, was we used to have a standardized test in that course, in that grade. And there used to be all the practice materials. So some of those materials would be really great questions, right? And it almost gave us like, wow, like I was like, I never appreciated how good of a question this was and how it related to these two different topics, these two different concepts, two different strands. Like I could put them in both of these buckets, you know, and it's like, and I could, you know, work that through. So trying to be creative on where you might find some of these problems. Like you probably will have some old, you know, maybe textbooks or things like that that might have some really good problems that, you know, maybe used to get assigned as homework, and you can slip those in there as well. Like it's not, being unique is not cool in this world, you know, in that particular game. It's more or less about having an opportunity for a student to kind of remove the barrier for them to get a little better with a concept, you know? So it will start and you'll feel like it's a little thin. But again, you kind of focus on that first maybe 2 weeks
It's
of school and you go, do I have enough to like help students when we do that first improvement day, that first, you know,
uh,
work
yeah,
period? Is there enough there to keep them working and keep them productive? Yeah. Okay,
right,
good. And then you can start looking to the next ones, but try not to feel like you've got to have it fully, you
right.
know, taken care of for the entire school year all up front.
And and remember, the keep in mind that the reason that you're, say, building this, let's call it like a bank up, is what you're looking for. And this is the important part, is to know what you're looking for from a student, to say you're here and this on this standard right now. So if I'm putting you at like orange or 3 stars or level 4, like, what that looks like. You've got that, like, confidence that, yeah, you have demonstrated that consistently, and therefore I can check you off on, yep, I feel like consistently you're doing that level on that standard, and now you're ready for the next level. Like, knowing that not only will help you pick and choose questions, but it also will realize, going, what do I need to keep seeing from this student to let them go, or ask them to go to the next level, because that's it's like, we don't want to just go, it's 2 questions, and if I solve these 2 questions, and then it's like, well, sometimes I had to help them on those 2 questions to get there, and then now I need more questions. So it's like knowing when you feel confident that they've hit the level 3 or the level 4 is really important, because, like, there's nothing stopping you from going, like, you know what, I helped you get to this point and I'm just not confident that you're at the level 4, but what do I do now to help them, or show that consistency that you're at that level? Okay, let's go grab another question from, like, all of a sudden you now know that I need to put something else in front of them to convince myself, and have the professional judgment around this student to go, this is where you are. Because that's what the point of the standards-based grading is to continually go, where is this student on the learning goal, and what can I do to help them get to the next level, and then also be convinced that they understand, know, and can do that, say, standard consistently, performing at that level. So that's the really important work, is to be able to go, yep, you're here because of this, this, and this, and I've seen it, I've witnessed it, I've observed it, I've had conversations with you, I feel confident you're here, and you can move on to the next level. So that's the real important part to kind of focus on, and then that will then that will allow you to kind of like pick and choose when you're ready to do it. And you could do that on the fly because you've got that understanding of what that looks like.
Well, thank you. That helps a lot because I had created these and I created one question for each level. I'm like, I don't know if that's enough because what if a kid doesn't get it right? Then they
Right.
correct it. Now I need something else for them to show me that they got it. So
Mm-hmm.
I need a few
Mm-hmm.
more questions, at least for each topic in my banks that I've
and,
created.
and don't be like we said, it's like, don't be, you know, concerns a wrong word. Like, don't stress about some of this is going to happen on the fly,
Yeah.
and I think true learning, because you're not going to be able to predict everything, and nor is there enough time in a day or anything like that, nor are we smart enough, like we don't know exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to unravel. But as you go, it's like if you get yourself a nice little baseline to go and you're starting this process, and you're going to notice it's like certain topics are going to requires the wrong word, but certain topics could use more options, right? It's like kids are struggling on this topic. And some of these topics you already know if you've taught this material before. You go, around here, these students tend to struggle in this area. It's like, I want to make sure I'm like thickening that one up, that area, that topic, that standard, maybe more so than this other standard. Maybe there's a standard that you're like, you know what? It's not actually like a key understanding here
Or
that, I'm not going to
or
stress
or
about
you've
having
witnessed,
5 versions of it,
right? Or you've witnessed from the class, from experience, that everyone's doing really well on that standard, and you don't realize, and let's say that everyone got to like a 2, or a 3 just from the consistency, because what 2 or 3 looks like, and you've witnessed it over time, and they're like, I don't need a question on 2 because I feel like everyone's there already. And then now I just need 3, the next, whatever the
Mhm.
next level up is. So sometimes like that in time experience will help kind of develop kind of like what you need to pull.
And I was thinking that with some of the easier standards, I don't know if I need a level 2 because kids are most of the time there. It's the
Hmm.
upper ones that they would need in those.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Seth, based on the conversation here today, what do you think is your next, like, what's your immediate next step? Like thinking about what you're going to do to implement some of the things we talked about here today, or, maybe it's something different that you're going to try in the classroom. I know you're off right now, but going back, like, what do you think is something that you're going to do right away?
So my biggest thing, and I've started this, is working on different questions for my buckets, like just putting those in. I'm also a football coach, so like starting the year for me, I don't have a lot of time
It's
like
Right.
to be.
hectic. Yeah.
So for me, I like to try to get a lot of the legwork done if I can in the summer, so that way when football season starts, I'm not like uh I don't know, like not running
Losing
around.
your
Sure.
mind.
Exactly,
Sure. Sure.
exactly. So my goal, I think I'm going to try to at least get a couple questions for each standard done this summer. Um, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do the whole gamifying grading. I want to try to, because the fresh grade thing that you guys shared and there is really cool. But I really want to use the Google. I'm going to try to figure out how to use the Google Sheets to do that. So I need to work on getting the gamified grading set up and getting the standards of buckets kind of set up. I've already got
Don't do too much. Don't do too much. You'll
oh,
burn
Yeah.
out.
I know.
Yeah. But I like it. And I think, what, with your thinking here and thinking ahead and knowing what fall is like with football season, it's a great idea to, like, as long as you don't put too much pressure during the summer on yourself, right?
Yeah.
But you set yourself some mini goals and go, I'd like to have a certain amount done so that you just feel like you've got like a good solid start, like that's kind of the goal. Just make sure it's not about, being perfect coming in. Cause of course you could spend the whole summer and try to make the perfect program. And guess what? You're going to find out after a few weeks, you're like,
That's
oh
not
shoot, I
perfect.
want to, yeah, I want to tweak this and I want to tweak that. So you know what though, getting yourself that foundation, I like that plan. I really do. And while I would say the gamifying, keep that in the back of your mind. And I would say, there might be an epiphany you have right in the summer. And you go, this is how I'm going to do it. Great. But don't dwell on it, because what you're going to find is that by giving students the opportunity to improve, of course, you're not going to get 100% buy-in right away from students. It's going to take time, just like any changes that you make. But by getting that started, that's the most important part. The most important part is being able to give students, having that clear message at the beginning of the school year that this class is about growth and that you're going to have opportunities. And I'm going to guess that's probably the same on a football team, right? I coach baseball, I coach hockey. You are going to play to where you improve. Like if you improve, you're going to get the playing time. You know, it's not like, and the same should be true in a math classroom. So I'm going to give you every opportunity to keep getting better. And you're setting up a program that's going to allow for that sort of culture in your math classroom to kind of evolve. And some of the other bells and whistles that you'll throw in there, they'll be fun. They'll be great. They'll help with, maybe that, handful of kids that haven't fully bought in yet. But the main thing is what you're working on right now. So just, stay the course, set yourself some, measurable goals for yourself to go, hey, I want to have X, Y, and Z done before the school year starts. And the final thing is give yourself grace. It's not going to go perfect the first time, but it sounds like you're on the right path and you're going to see some really, really great things happen from it.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff. Seth, we want to thank you for joining us here on the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. Would you be open to, checking in as the school and maybe when football's over, when things are kind of settling down and seeing how, where you are on this
or
assessment
this
journey.
time next year, John, we can
Or
let
this
them have
time,
the
like
full,
a full year, we'll
cycle,
check in with you to see how things are going.
Yeah, no, it'd be definitely good to reflect on being the leader of the department, because that's my first time doing that. Plus
Right.
also throwing in the portfolios. I can check in with all of that stuff.
Sounds
I
perfect.
I love it. That's great. Seth, it's awesome. Always connecting with our friends from Katy, Texas. And I hope you have an awesome summer. Don't work too hard, but I do appreciate, and I know the kids are going to appreciate the time and effort you're putting in here. And we look forward to catching up with you sometime in the next school year.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, my friends. Take care.
Bye.